I'm Cynthia Rowland, and this is episode 105 of EO Radio Show. As 2024 draws to a close, it seemed to me that this is a good time to share my year-end thoughts on important annual governance responsibilities for nonprofits, and to also check in on other housekeeping that busy nonprofits sometimes overlook, and that could be a good start for nonprofit leaders to put on their list of things to do in the coming year. This episode refreshes the good advice in my episode 25 from December of 2022. Other than updating the years by adding 2 at each reference, the advice still stands. I hope you find it helpful food for thought as you think about where your organization is on all these compliance matters and what might need to be attended to as this year comes to a close. Or if you run out of time, these can be the basis for your 2025 New Year's resolutions for your charity. Welcome to the EO Radio Show, your nonprofit legal resource. Brought to you by the Exempt Organizations Group at Farella, Braun & Martel. My name is Cynthia Rowland, and I'm a partner at Farella. I'm a business and tax lawyer with more than 30 years of experience advising clients on nonprofit and charity law. Through this podcast, our lawyers and guests will discuss a range of legal and business issues impacting the nonprofit world because we understand you work hard every day to make your community a better place to live and do business. Many of our programs focus on the basics, and at times we'll do a deep dive into narrow and complicated legal issues. Again, welcome to the EO Radio Show. We're glad you're here. Welcome to the final episode for 2022. I feel like celebrating. We've made it through a whole year. The idea of this show was hatched last January as my New Year's resolution, and I'm excited that I've ended the year with 25 quality episodes and lots of energy for 2023. So here is my list of 10 things for nonprofit leaders to think about as they start their planning for 2023. Number 1, annual filings. Don't forget those pesky annual regulatory filings. Forgetting to file the annual 990s, even for a small organization, can result in loss of tax-exempt status. Make sure someone is attending to all of the following. The Form 990 must be filed with the IRS. The organization needs to make sure that it has collected vendor W-9s and provided Form 1099 to all vendors, as required, by January 31. Forms W-2 and or the Form 1099 must be provided to staff members, and Forms 941 or 944 for employment taxes must be filed with the IRS by January 31 also. For nonprofits operating in California, Form 199 must be filed with the Franchise Tax Board. Form RRF-1 must be filed by most charitable organizations with the California Attorney General Registry of Charitable Trusts. That is, most charitable organizations other than churches and schools, which are exempt from that requirement. Organizations that are subject to this RRF-1 filing requirement are also required to have an independent audit if the annual revenue exceeds $2 million in California. Some other states have lower thresholds, so if your organization is operating in states as well as California, an audit may be required at a lower revenue level. The annual Form SI-100, actually it's not annual, it's biannual, has to be filed with the California Secretary of State, and registered agent filings may need to be renewed with the California Secretary of State. Also, these forms have to be updated if there's been changes in leadership, so check on that. And of course, if your nonprofit is registered in other states, be sure to check the filing requirements on all the states where the organization is registered to avoid late filing penalties. So to recap on these annual filings, if you think there's been a misstep and something hasn't been filed, it's always easier to try to correct it sooner rather than later. Similarly, number 2 on my list, annual board meetings. Check your bylaws for specific requirements for annual meetings. Some bylaws are very specific and require monthly or quarterly board meetings. If the organization hasn't held a formal meeting in 2022, get it scheduled soon, or prepare a unanimous written consent for the board of directors to approve before the end of the year. Have your board members been reappointed or reelected as required by the bylaws? If governance formalities haven't been followed, often it's easier and cheaper to correct these oversights before a real problem arises. So check on that annual meeting and check the minute book to make sure everything's in order. Number 3, bylaws. Speaking of governance, when was the last time you actually reviewed your bylaws? Are your actual governance practices following the bylaws? While changes to corporate governance rules and practices haven't changed very much in the past decade even, there are some beneficial changes that might streamline your organization's governance practices if you're not actually following what's written in the bylaws. Number 4, conflicts of interest. Have your directors and officers reviewed the organization's conflicts of interest policy recently? Have they disclosed any conflicts in this past year? While annual disclosure is a best practice, if it's been overlooked for a few years, now is a great time to check in with everyone in leadership to make sure that potential conflicts of interest are addressed. Number 5, other policies. Nonprofits that file IRS Form 990 are required to annually represent whether they have a whistleblower and document retention policy. While there are no penalties for not having them, at least there are no Internal Revenue Code penalties, they do reflect best practices. If you don't have these policies, consider getting them in place in the coming year. Item number 6, employees. When was the last time the employee handbook was updated? There have been many important changes to employment laws in the past few years, and even in the past year, and I think there are some coming up in January. In fact, there is a January episode of EO Radio Show scheduled where we'll talk about important changes in employment laws and best practices for keeping up to date. Number 7, other states. Think about it. Do you operate programs in other states or even other countries? Does your organization fundraise nationally, including through your website? You might want to check with the relevant regulatory agencies in the states where you operate or fundraise and consider whether your organization should register or apply for tax-exempt status in states in addition to the state where you're already registered. Number 8, how's your website looking? Is your website content out of date? This is a good time of year to make sure your website has relevant and accurate content for the start of the new year. Make sure contact information and lists of officers and directors are accurate. Speaking of websites, item number 9 is privacy policies. Privacy policies also need regular attention, and changes to applicable state and federal laws should be incorporated into the website privacy policy page, along with appropriate terms of use. We do have an episode planned for early 2023 with my partner Nate Garhart, who will talk about best practices and changes that take effect in 2023 for privacy policy and terms of use. Speaking of which, that brings me to item number 10, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity measures are a hot topic and are increasingly important. If that's an item you've been thinking about but just haven't yet addressed organization-wide, make that a New Year's resolution. Episode 12 of EO Radio Show talks about cybersecurity risk management. So if you want more to think about on that topic, tune in to episode 12 for an interview with Tim Parisi, an expert on tools and best practices for protecting a nonprofit organization from cybersecurity threats. So that's all for this short episode and for the year 2022. I'm really pleased to have launched this podcast this year, and I hope it's been useful to you. I'll continue the cadence of an episode every Monday, except for Mondays that are holidays. So the next episode should be available on or around January 9th of 2023. Wrapping up for this year, I'm Cynthia Rowland, and you've been listening to EO Radio Show, your nonprofit legal resource, brought to you by the Exempt Organizations Group at Varela, Braun & Martell. If you have suggestions for topics you would like for us to discuss, please email us at eoradioshow@fbm.com. That's eoradioshow@fbm.com. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, make a difference.